Hello and welcome. My name is Masami Marbo, and I would like to thank you for joining this podcast on EU-Japan business cooperation in third countries. This podcast is a summary of research that has been carried out as part of the Minerva Market and Policy Intelligence Program of the EU-Japan Center for Industrial Cooperation. The center is a venture between the European Commission and the Japanese Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. It is a non-profit organization which aims at promoting all forms of industrial, trade and investment cooperation between the EU and Japan. All sources of this podcast are listed in the full report, which is available on the EU Japan Center's website. To begin with, cooperation between European and Japanese companies in third market is an increasing and promising business trend. For example, a study conducted by the German Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Japan in 2019 reveals that 69% of German companies in Japan are involved in business activities with Japanese partners outside Japan, a number on consistent increase from 64% in 2018 and 54% in 2017. In addition, 46% of German companies in Japan are generating revenues with Japanese customers outside Japan at least to the same extent as in Japan. Depending on the industry, the revenue ratio is 1 to 4. Hence, these figures show the EU and Japan are not only interesting markets as such, but also strategic hubs for third markets. But beyond business opportunities, EU-Japan business cooperation in third countries has also high political stakes. Indeed, they are notably the backbone of what is called EU-Japan connectivity. Actually, on the 27th of September 2019, the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, and the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, signed the Partnership on Sustainable Connectivity and Quality Infrastructure between the European Union and Japan. But what is connectivity? Why is connectivity important, and what is this EU-Japan connectivity partnership about? Connectivity is defined by the European Commission as being essentially about networks and can be appreciated according to three dimensions. First, physical connectivity focuses on enhancing transportation infrastructures, digital and energy networks and flows, and as such has a key economic and industrial dimension. Then, institutional connectivity revolves around the convergence of values and standards on the facilitation of fair trade and investment, but also on social and environmental criteria, and in particular on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Finally, connectivity has at its core a people-to-people dimension, the latter mainly addressing cooperation in the fields of education and research. Why is EU-Japan connectivity important? First, the cooperation of European and Japanese companies allows them to better compete. They may possess complementary strengths in technologies, market intelligence, financing, existing infrastructure and facilities, notwithstanding historical and cultural ties between several EU member states or Japan may have in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. Then, another objective of this EU-Japan enhanced cooperation is to advance common values and principles of freedom, democracy, and open markets. Even further, such cooperation also aims to defend and promote globally high standards in key areas such as sustainability, the guarantee of human rights, and digital rules on key technologies such as 5G, artificial intelligence, and facial recognition. Indeed, EU-Japan connectivity is very strategic, as China has been increasingly assertive with respect to its gigantic Belt and Road Initiative launched in 2013, while the United States has also joined the game with their Blue Dot network introduced in 2019. Against this background, the goal of my research has been first, to provide a better understanding of the current situation in terms of EU-Japan business cooperation in third countries. Second, to provide some recommendations for companies willing to engage in such business cooperation, as well as some recommendations for trade promotion organizations to support and encourage such business cooperation. Just a couple of words on my methodology. So my research has mostly relied on qualitative analysis and notably a review of 30 selected case studies, discussions with corporate and institutional stakeholders, as well as an appraisal of complementary sources such as newspapers, articles, press releases, previous studies, and public interventions. Nonetheless, the absence of comprehensive data on EU-Japan business cooperation in third countries has been the most significant limit to the analysis of the report, and I hope this report will galvanize trade promotion organizations in conducting more extensive research on such an important trend. To begin with, we can distinguish 5 cooperation schemes regarding EU-Japan business cooperation in third countries. I will present each of them by illustrating them with one or two case studies. The first cooperation scheme is cooperation in products and services. That is when EU and Japan businesses collaborate in, for example, equipment procurement, certification and licensing, legal and business consulting, providing total solutions to customers in third markets. An example of cooperation in products and services is a project of a thermal power plant in northern Mindanao in the Philippines, undertaken by Japanese Mitsubishi Corporation and Toshiba Plant and Services Corporation. The project is comprised of two units of 55 megawatts each, being undertaken on a full turnkey basis, by which the two Japanese companies execute the project in its entirety, including engineering, civil work, procurement, and testing. German company ThyssenKrupp's Indian subsidiary has supplied 3 boilers to the plant. The order volume would have amounted to approximately $30 million. The second cooperation scheme is cooperation in engineering, that is when EU and Japan businesses collaborate on projects in third-party markets in such forms as EPC contracting, subcontracting, or joint bidding. An illustration is the case of cooperation between Hitachi and Veolia. In 2014, the Japanese and French companies announced the completion of a memorandum of understanding by which they agreed on collaborating on a joint rollout of business targeting city and sewage treatment, seawater desalination, and other water infrastructure projects. The targeted locations were the Middle East, Africa, and the Asia-Pacific regions. The MOU was signed after Hitachi and a subsidiary of Veolia Water Solutions and Technologies secured an order for engineering procurement construction (EPC) on a water desalination plant in Iraq, as well as operation and maintenance for 5 years, together with Egyptian firm Aramco. The consortium received a second order for the EPC of pretreatment and surrounding facilities at a water desalination plant. Then, a second joint project is the expansion of a large-scale sewage treatment facility in Vietnam in 2015. The consortium formed by Hitachi and Veolia subsidiary OTV, together with South Korean construction company POSCO E&C, received an order from Ho Chi Minh City. The contract amounted to around $130 million. The Japanese government has provided loan assistance to the construction of these pretreatment facilities in Iraq and the project in Vietnam. The third cooperation scheme is cooperation in investment, that is when EU and Japan businesses invest together in third-party markets through, for example, mergers and acquisitions, establishment of joint ventures, or shareholdings in which they share both risk and benefits. The first example of cooperation in investment is the joint venture MHI Vestas between the Japanese company Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Danish company Vestas. This joint venture was established in April 2014 and is dedicated to business in offshore wind turbines. The Japan Bank for International Cooperation played a significant role in the creation of this joint venture by co-investing together with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. MHI Vestas has had several projects in the North Sea coastal countries, which was its initial focus, and is now geographically expanding its activities to the US and Asia, and more particularly Taiwan and Vietnam. According to an article from the Nikkei Asian Review, MHI Vestas holds 33% of global market share in offshore wind turbines. The second example is the investment of $26 million by Japanese trading company Marubeni in Azuri in June 2019. Azuri is a British company producing and distributing solar energy equipment. The company provides affordable pay-as-you-go solar home systems to off-grid consumers across Africa. The fourth cooperation scheme is cooperation in industry and finance combination. That is when EU and Japan financial institutions collaborate through, for example, syndicated loans, joint financing, on lending, or equity investment in third markets to broaden financing channels for businesses and reduce financing risk. An example of cooperation in industry and finance combination is the Energy from Waste facility of Japanese company Itochu Corporation and French Suez. On the 29th of September 2017, the two companies signed a 25-year public-private partnership contract with the city of Belgrade in Serbia. It is a result of cooperation between international lenders and in particular the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group, and the Austrian Development Bank. The fifth cooperation scheme is strategic cooperation among businesses, that is when EU and Japan businesses enter in strategic cooperation agreements, establishing alliance or making other efforts, such as for example on R&D, talent management, manufacturing, engineering, or logistics. The collaboration between Japanese company Entity Data and Spanish startup CityBeats is the first example. CityBeats won the 2016-2017 edition of the NTT Data's Open Innovation Contest. As a result, the two companies entered into a cooperation on the joint development of a citizen engagement platform which enables social understanding of citizen opinions and emotions in certain areas using AI. CityBeats technology is not sensitive to language and thus can have applications worldwide. The two companies have, for example, an ongoing project in East Africa that fosters financial inclusion by analyzing local residents' needs and problems related to financial services. Then, the collaboration between Japanese architectural design firm Azusa Sekkei and French consulting firm Ingerop is a second example. Indeed, in 2018, the two companies announced the completion of a strategic alliance which encompasses collaboration on projects in Europe, Africa, and Asia, and more specifically, those commissioned by the Japanese International Cooperation Agency, JICA, the French Development Agency, and the Asian Development Bank. As for the country of origin of the European companies, it seems that in most cases, it is not immediately relevant to the extent that business cooperation remains mainly driven by market motivations, such as cost competitiveness or particular technologies. When the country of the European company mattered, it has been for two main reasons. The first is when it is correlated to industry specialization, such as Germany in automotive or Turkey in manufacturing and construction. The second reason is the link between this European country and the third country in which the project takes place. These links may be cultural, historical, linguistic, but also based on present economic and diplomatic ties as well as development policy. This is, for example, particularly relevant in business partnerships implicating Spanish companies in Latin America or French companies in French-speaking Africa. As for the size of the companies involved in such partnerships, as a rule of thumb, business cooperation in third countries often involve large-scale infrastructure projects of which, by nature, the investments and the risks are more likely to be undertaken by large companies, though SMEs may be likely to be involved as suppliers. Furthermore, business cooperation of large-sized companies and SMEs in third countries usually occur when a cash-rich and large Japanese company is interested in investing in innovative technologies of a European SME, which have applications particularly tailored for a specific demand in a third market. There are various forms of business cooperation in which European and Japanese companies engage when working together in third countries. To start with, they may not necessarily engage in a legally binding relationship. We observe, for example, that several companies prefer to rely on a memorandum of understanding to initiate and formalize business cooperation, for instance, in committing to exploring together opportunities, such as in the case with Hitachi and Veolia. Then, not surprisingly, for industrial and specific projects, European and Japanese companies will cooperate on a clear legal basis, such as under joint ventures, consortia, or contractor-supplier relationships. Last but not the least, investment and acquisition are also significant forms of cooperation in the case that one company is particularly interested in expanding its portfolio in terms of technology and geographically. Geographically, the study of the German Chamber of Commerce indicates that such business cooperation seems particularly interesting in Asia, so ASEAN, China, and India, Europe, South America, and Africa. Besides, as for the Japanese side, there seems to be a particular demand from companies and authorities for cooperation with European business counterparts in Africa, in which Japanese companies have a weak presence. Then, sectors in which it seems particularly relevant for European and Japanese companies to work together in third markets are large-scale industrial contracts including transportation, waste and water management, machinery and industrial equipment, and construction, but also raw materials, power generation and in particular renewables, and finally in the domain of information technology and telecommunications. Drivers for business cooperation include, first and foremost, a long-term relationship between the partner companies, which sometimes have gradually cooperated and built trust over several decades. Additionally, cooperation between European and Japanese companies in third countries is also, of course, driven by complementary technologies and expertise, market intelligence and local know-how, and corresponding human resources. Motivations for pooling risk of large-scale projects and reducing costs by, for instance, relying on the partner company local infrastructures are also important. Besides, business cooperation might be driven by general ambitions of expanding activities overseas and for European companies in strengthening the strategic importance of the Japanese subsidiaries. The last driver for cooperation maybe the relative similarities in compliance standards and corporate cultures between European and Japanese companies. There are also several challenges for entering into business cooperation and jointly conducting projects in third countries. A first is the language, culture, and management differences between the European and Japanese partner companies, which may be aggravated by the fact that conflicts may not be judged in the light of the local legal or mediation system, as the latter can be embryonic in certain third countries. A second challenge is that companies might consider their counterparts as more competitors than potential partners, although this problem varies greatly from one sector to another. Henceforth, companies might fear business cooperation because of too high risk in leakage of technology or strategic information, as well as introducing their counterparts to prospective clients that ultimately they may lose. Moving on to the second part of this podcast. As for businesses, general recommendations on any business cooperation prevail. Businesses must have a strong will to cooperate based on a mutual understanding of common interest and intercomplementariness in all its dimensions. In addition, several companies highlighted negotiation of the business cooperation and project details often occur in the headquarters in Japan. Then, when cooperating in third countries, best practices shared by companies focused on sustaining attention in the local environment and demand, as well as on being vigilant concerning ethics and compliance standards. Other than these general recommendations, two highlights. The first is that privileged stakeholders for European companies looking for Japanese partners for overseas projects are the Japanese general trading companies, or in Japanese, Sogo Shosha. They are key actors in the Japanese economy because of their large size and scope, their extremely diversified activities, products, services, industry-wise and geographically. There are currently 7 of them that you can see on the graph. Regarding third country business cooperation, they are intermediaries managing and taking charge of orders from contractors and thereby choosing products and equipment from manufacturers, including foreign ones, or to engage in joint bidding and consortia, but also financing coordinator as well as considerable investors. Another important window of opportunity for European companies, and in particular SMEs, is the recent shift of Japanese companies to a strategy of open innovation, which is particularly relevant in the industries of telecommunications, automotive, electronics, and railway. This is, for example, illustrated by the collaboration between NTT Data and CityBits following NTT Data's Open Innovation Contest. Against this background, this report lays out some recommendations to enhance further EU-Japan business cooperation in third countries. The first is the promotion of the benefits of this cooperation to relevant EU, Japan, and third countries' institutional and corporate stakeholders, as well as sharing success stories. Opportunities that EU-Japan business cooperation in third countries represent for companies, for third countries as clients, as well as on the broad political spectrum, are to the least poorly known, and to the worst the object of heavy skepticism from all kinds of stakeholders. The second pillar is the support of the matchmaking of businesses. The latter should have 3 approaches: supporting companies with an already concrete project, technology or service tailored for or located in a third market and looking for a partner for further development, supporting existing EU-Japan partner companies in exploring opportunities in third markets, and supporting companies in entering in strategic collaboration with the partner with whom they will jointly seek projects in third markets. The last focus should bear on reinforcing institutional cooperation. The latter should pursue the objectives of ensuring clear visibility on the human and financial resources mobilized, aligning institutional interests and third country business strategies, and coordinating on the support of EU-Japan business in third countries as detailed in the 2 actions just mentioned. So these recommendations conclude my podcast. If you're interested in learning further on EU-Japan business cooperation in third countries and on many more case studies, I invite you to read the full report, of which this podcast is only a condensed version. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions, and thank you for your attention.